Hey y'all, welcome to the show. It is Takedown Talk, episode 2, and today we are taking a look at the Three Rivers Manufacturing Atom. Alright y'all, I got a brew, I got a blade. Let's get into it. So why the TRM Atom? Well, when you're looking at the knife itself, it's not a hard question to answer. It's a beautiful knife. It's an elegant design. It operates just flawlessly, and it's a joy to use. And I think what I really like about this knife is that it couples everything great about modern knife making to everything that's, elegant and gorgeous about traditional knife making. I think we see that in the handle in particular, which is a bone linen micarta. Now, you can pick this knife up in G10 and carbon fiber. You have options, but the fact that they offer micarta as well, I think, goes a long way to kind of evoke that traditional aesthetic. So in terms of use, this is just your classic EDC knife. It's very simple, very straightforward design, and it's not particularly startling to those folks that aren't necessarily around knives all the time. And also with that deep carry fold over pocket clip, it just hides away in your pocket. It rides very nicely. It's very light as well. The weight comes in right around 3 ounces. So as far as everyday carry goes, I mean, this is, in many circles, I think this would be the ideal knife. All right, well, let's get into it. Let's find out what makes the TRM Atom tick. As always, I'm going to be using the iFixit toolkit to disassemble this guy. So let's see. We're actually not going to start with the pivot today. We are going to start with these 2 screws right here. And I'm sure you may already know this if you're looking up information about the Atom, but this knife has a pretty sweet little trick. So let's get started. I think those guys sure look like T6s. So let me get my T6 here. Here we go. All right. I picked up this particular Atom not too long ago. Blade HQ had a few of them come in, and I believe they were all micarta models. And I'm a pretty big micarta fan. Once you've handled micarta, it's kind of hard to go back to G10. G10's great, but micarta is just so comfortable. All right, so here's the cool trick. So we've removed those 2 T6s, and now we're just going to lift up the micarta scale here, and look at that. Just lifts right up around the pivot. What you have underneath is a titanium scale. And one thing I'm going to show you while we're here, notice the blade centering. That is the one qualm that I've had with this knife, is it's extraordinarily off-center, to be polite. But centering's not really a thing that bothers me. As long as the blade closes without rubbing, I'm not too torn up about it. But we are going to try to fix that, and I'm going to continue disassembling here on this side. We have what I think are 2 T6s holding in the pocket clip, and those go directly into the opposite titanium scale, so we'll take those out. I watched a video recently on Advanced Knife Bros channel where he discussed the TRM Atom. And I think he said a viewer or somebody on Instagram maybe had told him, got one more screw by the way holding in this scale that we're going to take off, had told him that you could actually straighten out the blade, or not the blade, but the centering on the blade by, let's get that scale off. Come on. There we go. Come on. There we go. That right here. By bending the titanium. So that's something we're going to try today. And I'm not going to be too tough on it. I just want to see what we can do here. Titanium is typically a little bit more malleable than steel in terms of weight. Now watch this, guys. This is the alignment as it was when I received it, and look at that. So obviously I don't want to go messing up this wonderful knife, but I am going to just give it a little bit of a torque here. No, guys, I'm not seeing it. I'm not going to force it, simply because this knife works great. And as I said earlier, centering is not something that particularly worries me. As long as the knife operates as it should, that's what really matters to me. All right, so why don't we get these titanium scales off? I'll mention, by the way, too, these titanium scales they're nested inside of these micarta linen scales, or G10, depending on which model you have. But I always appreciate that in a knife. I think that's such a beautiful feature. You will notice how dirty the underside of the scales tend to get. We're going to take care of that. So first off, let's go ahead and get that pivot out of there. And I believe that's a T10. So let me get a T10 out here. You know, I am tempted to try to straighten it out again, but it's just not worth making a mess of an already great knife. Yeah. One thing I will say is when I have disassembled and reassembled this knife in the past, it's straightened out, and I put it back together and it's perfectly straight. And then just after some use, it goes back to leaning, and I've never figured out why that is. Let's go ahead and pop that side of the pivot out. Perfect. Slide the blade out here. All right. And as you can see here, we are operating on bronze washers, which is my favorite method of pivot deployment. They're reliable and they're simple. It's not much to mess up there. T6s on these titanium standoffs. So as I said, I know I mentioned this earlier, but the underscales are titanium, and I'm pretty sure the standoffs as well as the pocket clip are also titanium. So that also brings up the issue of having a titanium liner lock against a steel lock face. If you guys watched the first episode where I got into the Spyderco Spidey Chef, for some reason this knife does not have the lock stick issue that my Spidey Chef has. For whatever reason, this knife just locks and unlocks beautifully. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm not complaining by any stretch of the imagination. Okay guys, well this is our exploded view. Let me get everything nice and oriented for y'all. So let's get these parts cataloged. So we've got 2 outer linen micarta scales, but depending on the model you get, these could also be G10 or carbon fiber. A lot of options with 3 rivers. We have our 20 CV blade, 2 titanium liners, 3 titanium standoffs, 3 titanium standoff screws. Actually, I'm not sure if those screws are titanium. They could be steel. But in any case, the screws go directly through one of the titanium liners through the standoffs, and they screw into the opposite titanium liner. It's a pretty good design there, in my opinion. We have our our blade stop here, 2 bronze washers, our pivot screw, our pivot collar, 3 body screws, 2 pocket clip screws, and then finally our pocket clip. So this is a very simple knife to take down, and it was clearly designed with that in mind. And that's something that, for me as an enthusiast, I always really appreciate it when a knife company hands you a knife that they intend for you to be able to take care of yourself. So speaking of which, let's get to it. Let's start cleaning this guy up. I'm just going to be using a spray bottle of soap and water. Nothing too crazy. And let's get these scales cleaned out. One thing that's interesting about micarta is that you can actually oil it and you can make the color, a few shades darker. And I've done that with mineral oil on a couple of my knives that have micarta handles. And it's a pretty striking difference. Now what I have found though is that eventually it'll kind of dry out and it'll go back to its first appearance, but I'm sure there's a type of oil that you could use that would be longer lasting, maybe more effective. I'm trying not to get too much liquid onto the lock face on the blade. I don't want to have any lock stick issues. But as of yet, I've never had that happen with this knife. So let's try to clean these inner liners up really well. They've got some stuff on them. This knife has gotten quite a lot of pocket time from me. This is one of the few knives that I own that I don't really have a heavy sentimental attachment to it. It's more just, it's just such a great, well-balanced everyday knife. And when I saw it, I was just very impressed by the design and by the simplicity of it. And to me, it's a beautiful knife. Now, obviously, that's very subjective, but for me, it ticked a lot of those aesthetic boxes that I tend to look for. I was actually kind of stuck between this knife and the North Arm knife Skaha, and one of my issues with the Skaha is it's just so hard to get it. And granted, these are not easy to get, but every now and then Blade HQ will carry them, and TRM themselves, they do runs frequently enough that if you get on their email list, you will 100% be able to get one. The Skahas, I have had less luck with trying to be. Oh gosh, these bronze washers are so hard to pick up. I have had less luck though trying to be on point when those knives become available. All right. As for everything else, I don't really think any of the screws or anything need to. We will clean up the pivot collar here. When this knife is freshly oiled, the action on it is superb. It's not drop shutty, but it's pretty close. Honestly, for me, the more I get into knife ownership as a hobby, the less I care about having a drop shut action. I mean, it's fun, don't get me wrong, and it's fun and it's fidgety, but it's not super important to me these days. Okay, so that should take care of the cleaning. Do a quick dry off here, and then we'll get back into reassembly. So let's start with, you know what, first I'm going to move these micarta scales out of the way. And let's get the blade stop in place here. Blade stops are always my least favorite thing to deal with. I always feel like I'm going to lose these tiny little things. Less so the screws. I don't know why. The screws don't worry me too much. So as you can see here, the blade stop is not held in by the liner. Instead, it is held in by the outer scale. So just bear that in mind when you're working on this knife. Let's get our pivot in place. Oh, not so good with my left hand. All right. And we'll go ahead and get our oil going here. Just regular old mineral oil, food safe. A little bit thick, a little thicker than I'd like, but readily available and easy to use. And don't have to worry about ingesting it. So I'm going to put a dab of mineral oil here. Use the dry side and just kind of push that around the pivot. Alright, let's drop one of our washers in there. There we go. A little bit. Awesome. And then now that we have the blade stop and the washer in there and the pivot, let's get our blade in place. I always find that if you hold the liner down, it tends to make things easier. Now we're going to need to turn that pivot because it is D-shaped and the flat of the D is at the top. So let's see here. Yeah, I think we can do it this way. Oh, oh, that's not tooled. I wonder if I can do it by hand. Potentially. Actually, let's do this. Do this here. Nope. Okay, so what I'm going to need to do here is I'm going to drop the knife back off, and now this should be easier to do. Yep. Okay, so we want that. Want to be sure that that pivot has the D toward the has the flat end toward the top. Let's line up the bronze washer there. Don't be a fool about this. Let's do this right. There we go. That is a tight-fitting washer. Do not want to bend it. There we go. And I'll be able to correct that even if it's a tiny bit off. That won't be an issue. All right. Now I'm actually going to get these, before I mess with the standoffs, I'm going to get this liner in place. And we're also going to go ahead, oh, what am I saying? I need to put the other washer on here. It's been a long day, guys. It's a long day. I was going to say earlier, I think I forgot to finish my train of thought, but yeah, this whole pandemic craziness is actually what led me to, which I'm sure it has for a lot of people, to making some videos for fun, and it's something I've always wanted to do, but I have not had the time, and lo and behold, now I do. Now you see here how I can kind of manipulate that pivot now. Now my blade stop's coming out. Let's correct that here. Come on. You don't need to go out. There we go. You can fix that by Lord help me, guys. That pivot back. I get that washer back on there. There we go. You know what? That's coming out again. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and lay this inside of the scale, and that'll prevent the blade stop. Actually, you know what? The blade stop is supposed to do that. It's intended to do that. Let me show you guys. See that shoulder on the blade stop? It is intended to go that far back. So that's a good thing to know. A little bit of oil up here. Awesome. Alright, so let's drop in our other titanium liner. There we go. Beautiful. We're going to go ahead and put the pivot in place. So I'm going to wait to do those standoffs. Well, I'm going to do them next, but I had it's not the right size. I had a reason that I wanted to. You guys might be able to hear my dog drinking water. Sorry about that. They always pick just the right time to make noise. All right. So we have our pivot in place, and now we're going to drop in the standoffs. Since the standoffs just kind of hang out loose, I find it a little bit easier to deal with these with both liners in place, because then I can kind of sandwich them. So let's go ahead and drop this first screw in. And you can use the screw to kind of guide, yeah, you see that? You can kind of guide, and I need to get the T6 back on to do that. You can guide the standoffs back into place using the screws. So we'll go ahead and tighten that guy down. I don't worry about Loctiting these inner screws because, come on. Come on. I don't worry about Loctiting these inner screws since they are basically, they can't go anywhere because of the way these liners are nested inside the scales. Now this is an issue I've had a couple times with this knife where for some reason I have a really hard time getting this screw to contact the threading properly on the opposite scale. Let's try popping it. You know what? Let's just try a different screw. Let's see if we have better luck. What's preventing you from doing that? I'm going to try nudging the stand off a little bit. Alright, may as well try the other one. Alright, we're going to leave that one sitting for the time being, and I'm going to continue getting these back spacers back into place. Alright. And I know kind of loose back spacers like this might seem a little frightening, but these are actually very easy to deal with. You just gently nudge them in place and it's not a problem at all. Having issues with that one as well, but at the very least I just want to go ahead and have these all in position, and then I'll deal with getting them to thread. I've had this happen before, but not with all three of them. Okay, this one, yep, this one is taken. Okay, one down, two to go. Alright, this one just took. Come on. You're the last one, fella. And just like that. How weird. Alright, so we've got our standoffs in place. All that's left to do is get our outer scales fully attached. So let's start off with this side. Get our T6 in position here. Perfect. And the way I like to deal with pocket clips like this is to go ahead and drop the screws in place. Now you guys, I'm sure, have noticed that I am not clumsy, to put it that way. So you can see I just got that one to drop in. So that was unusual for me. Usually this takes me a few tries. Yep, number 2 is in too. I'm on a roll tonight, guys, making up for nearly forgetting the washer earlier. Alright. And this pocket clip has a nice little milled in groove that it falls into. So this part is quite simple once you get the screws in place. There you go, there's our pocket clip. Actually, I'll tell you what, guys. Under normal circumstances, I would have Loctited those, but I've not Loctited them in the past, and they're not going anywhere. Let's get them a little bit tighter. I will go ahead, I'm going to pop this guy out and put some Loctite on him real quick. This is such a tiny screw. Okay, so just blue Loctite. Not permanent, but it does the job. And you don't need but a tiny little bit, and I don't want to get much into my carta, so I'm actually just going to squeeze. Yep, perfect, just the tiniest amount. My one complaint with this knife is how tiny these handle screws are, and I know why they do it. I can appreciate why they do it, because they're trying to make the footprint of the screws as small as possible, and I do appreciate that. Oop. But they are kind of a pain in the butt to handle. So there you have it, guys, and this is what I was saying before about how when I disassemble and reassemble this knife, it straightens up pretty well. But give it a few days of use and it's going to be right back to leaning again. I'm not complaining though, it's nice to see that. I just know that it's not going to last. Don't let that, I mean, as long as the blade's not running, it is my opinion that blade centering should not dissuade you from owning a great knife. And this knife is a great knife. Okay, I tell you. Take it from me for what that's worth. All right, so let's check the action, guys. Let's see. A little tiny bit of blade play. Get my T10 back out here. And no play, so let's try to loosen it up, see what we can get here. A little tiny bit. Let's find the happy medium here. None. Ooh, smooth. Now this is not, as I said before, this is not really a drop shut knife, but I don't really want it to be. I quite like it the way it is. Now that said, you can probably, nope, I can't wiggle it closed. Just for the hell of it, try loosening it up just a touch. Ooh, too much, okay, just a little bit. A little bit of play. No play. Yeah, we'll call it there. It feels good when you close it though. I mean, when you close it and open it, it feels great. It's so smooth, just silky smooth. So, despite the fact that it doesn't have a drop shut action, it's still very satisfying to use this knife. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for hanging out with me, and you know, had a good time disassembling this knife with y'all. And if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to leave them. You know where to do that. And yeah, you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time.